The quiet suburb of Eastwood had always prided itself on order. Neatly trimmed hedges, white picket fences, and neighbours who waved politely but rarely lingered in conversation. Tonight, however, the usual stillness was broken by laughter, music, and the joyous hum of celebration drifting from the backyard of a stately brick house at the end of Willow Lane. Fairy lights twinkled across the lawn, a live jazz band played beneath a canopy, and guests in elegant attire danced and clapped in rhythm. It was a wedding. And not just any wedding, it was the wedding of Marcus Green, a tall, charismatic man in his early 40s, dressed in a perfectly tailored white tuxedo. His bride, Elena, stood radiant beside him in a gown of flowing satin, her smile brighter than the string lights overhead. Their hands clasped, their eyes glistening with the glow of love. They seemed the picture of everything right and beautiful in the world. But not everyone saw it that way. Across the street, a window slammed shut. Inside a tidy beige house, Mrs. Evelyn Parker stood stiff as a soldier, her phone already in hand. She was in her late 50s, with tightly curled blonde hair and a perpetual scowl etched deep into her face. From her living room, she glared at the scene outside as though watching a crime unfold. "Disgraceful," she muttered under her breath. "All that noise. All those people. This is a residential neighborhood, not a nightclub." Her husband, Harold, dozed in an armchair, snoring faintly, oblivious to the storm brewing beside him. Evelyn's lips tightened as the music swelled louder, as laughter burst across the night air. She pressed the phone to her ear, dialing 3 familiar numbers. 911. What is your emergency? Her voice hissed through clenched teeth. "Yes, I'd like to report a disturbance. There's a large gathering across the street from my house. Dozens of people. Loud music, shouting. It looks dangerous." The operator's tone remained calm. "Ma'am, is anyone injured? Are there weapons?" Evelyn hesitated, eyes narrowing as she watched a group of guests raise their glasses in a toast. She thought of the cars parked neatly along the curb, of the laughter spilling into the street, of the people. Black men in tuxedos, women in shimmering gowns, dancing without apology. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't know what they're hiding, but it doesn't look right. You should send someone before it gets out of hand." Back at the celebration, Marcus clinked his glass against Elena's, beaming as friends crowded around them. "To love," someone shouted. "To new beginnings," another added. The music shifted to a slow, soulful ballad. Marcus leaned in, whispering in Elena's ear. "I told you, nothing could ruin tonight." She smiled, eyes sparkling. "You'd better be right." But even as they swayed together, the faint wail of sirens crept into the background, almost blending with the music until the flashing blue and red lights cut across the night. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The band faltered. Guests turned toward the street, murmuring nervously. "Are those police?" one guest whispered. "Why are they here?" another asked, clutching her clutch purse tighter. Marcus stiffened, his grip on Elena tightening. "Stay calm," he murmured. "Let me handle this." Across the street, Evelyn watched with grim satisfaction as 2 squad cars pulled up, tires crunching on the asphalt. She tugged her cardigan tighter, whispering to herself, "Finally, order will be restored." One of the officers, a young man with a stern jawline, stepped out, hand resting on his belt. His partner scanned the crowd with a practiced gaze. "Evening, folks," the first officer called, his voice loud enough to cut through the stunned silence. "We've had a noise complaint. We're going to need to speak with the person in charge here." The guests exchanged glances, unease spreading. A few instinctively reached for their phones, recording. A child clung to his mother's arm. Marcus took a step forward, his white tuxedo gleaming under the flashing lights. Elena caught his wrist. "Marcus, wait. Let me—" But he gently shook his head. "No. If they want the person in charge, they'll get him." Meanwhile, Evelyn peered through her blinds, her heart racing with triumph. Let's see them laugh their way out of this one, she muttered. In her mind, she pictured citations, fines, maybe even arrests. After all, wasn't she just protecting her neighborhood? Back at the house, the officer's voice carried again. Who's responsible for this event? A hush fell. Then Marcus raised his hand, his voice calm but resonant. That would be me. All eyes turned toward him. The bride's hand trembled in his, but he held steady, his gaze fixed on the officers with quiet strength. The first officer narrowed his eyes, clearly bracing for confrontation. But before he could speak, Marcus continued. And before you write your report, you should know exactly who I am. He reached into his jacket, pulling out not a wallet, not an ID card, but a gleaming mayoral pin engraved with the seal of the city. He held it up, his voice ringing across the stunned gathering. My name is Marcus Green, and I am the elected mayor of Eastwood. The crowd erupted. Cheers, gasps, the flash of phone cameras lighting up the night. Elena's smile burst through her nerves as she clutched Marcus's hand proudly. The officers froze, caught between duty and shock, their expressions shifting from suspicion to dawning recognition. They had seen him before, at press conferences, at city events. They knew his face. From across the street, Evelyn's blinds slipped from her fingers. Her mouth fell open, words caught in her throat. "Oh, my God," she whispered, stumbling back from the window. The irony struck like lightning. The man she had tried to paint as a criminal was the very leader of the city she called home. And the night was only beginning. The flashing red and blue lights washed over the white canopy of the wedding, turning the joyful glow into something sharp, uneasy. The jazz band had stopped mid-song, instruments lowered, as the crowd instinctively tightened into small clusters. The sweet scent of roses and champagne suddenly felt out of place, drowned by the metallic tang of tension. The two officers approached slowly, their boots crunching on gravel. The younger one, Officer Daniels, had the rigid posture of someone new to the badge, eager to prove himself, unwilling to back down. His partner, Sergeant O'Malley, older and more weathered, scanned the crowd with tired eyes, but his hand hovered near his holster, a reflex he'd never quite unlearned. Marcus Green, still holding Elena's hand, stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm authority cut through the uncertainty like a blade. Marcus. "Officers, you've interrupted a wedding. What exactly do you believe is happening here?" Daniels glanced at his notepad, then back at Marcus. Officer Daniels. "Sir, we received a complaint of a large disruptive gathering. Possible disturbance of the peace." Whispers rippled through the guests. A woman clutched her pearls. A young man muttered under his breath, "A complaint? For dancing?" Marcus raised an eyebrow, voice steady. Marcus. "Disruptive. What you're witnessing is a lawful, permitted wedding. My wedding." Gasps escaped from a few guests who hadn't yet processed the unfolding drama. Elena squeezed his hand tightly, her eyes darting nervously to the officers. Elena, whispering, "Marcus, please, don't let them twist this." He gave her a reassuring smile. "Trust me." From across the street, Evelyn Parker's blinds quivered. She was pressed against them, her knuckles white as she peered at the flashing lights reflecting off her lawn. A self-satisfied smirk tugged at her lips, until she caught the words drifting faintly through the open night air. "My wedding. My name is Marcus Green." Evelyn froze. She knew that name. Everyone in Eastwood did. Her heart skipped a beat as she backed away from the window. Evelyn, to herself. "No, that can't be him. The mayor, living across from me? No, impossible." Her knees wobbled as the realization spread. She hadn't just called the police on a neighbor. She had called them on the mayor of the entire city. Back at the wedding, Sergeant O'Malley finally spoke, his voice gruff but edged with caution. "O'Malley. Mayor Green, we weren't informed this was your residence. Had we known..." Marcus, cutting in. "Had you known what?" You would have treated this crowd differently? With more respect? Tell me, Sergeant, would you have still approached with your hands hovering over your weapons if this was a wedding in one of the gated communities uptown? The words hit heavy. A murmur of agreement rose from the guests. Phone cameras clicked and blinked, documenting every second. Officer Daniels shifted uncomfortably. Daniels. Sir, we're just here because of a complaint. We have to respond. Marcus. Responding is one thing. Arriving with suspicion, with intimidation, at a gathering of families and friends, that's another. He gestured broadly to the crowd. Look around you. Do you see danger? Do you see criminals? Or do you see joy, love, and unity? The silence that followed was deafening. Even the cicadas outside seemed to pause. A small voice suddenly broke the tension. Child, from the crowd. It's my uncle's wedding. Why are the police here? All eyes turned to a little girl in a pink dress, her curls bouncing as she tugged at her mother's arm. Her innocence cut deeper than any speech. Marcus bent down slightly, meeting her eyes. Marcus, gently. They're just confused, sweetheart. But they'll understand soon enough. The guests clapped softly, murmuring in agreement. Some wiped away tears. Sergeant O'Malley exhaled, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. He knew there were cameras, witnesses, and, more than that, he knew the truth. O'Malley. Mayor Green, with all due respect, will file this as a resolved disturbance. No further action will be taken. Marcus. No further action? Sergeant, there will be action. Because this isn't about a complaint. This is about perception. Someone looked at a black wedding and saw danger. His voice sharpened, carrying across the hushed lawn. And until we face that truth, every call like this will end the same way. Innocent people interrupted, dignity questioned, joy stolen. Not tonight, not here, not ever again. The crowd erupted into applause, their voices rising in support. Evelyn stumbled back from her window, her face flushed with heat. She could hear the cheering, see the cameras flashing. Her neighbors, her mayor, standing tall against the very police she had summoned. Evelyn, muttering, "What have I done? Oh God, what have I done?" She collapsed into her armchair, heart pounding, dread curling in her stomach as she realized the storm she had unleashed. Back outside, Marcus turned back to his guests, raising his glass. Marcus. Let's not allow prejudice to write the story of tonight. Tonight is about love, about us. Let's celebrate louder than ever. The band, encouraged, struck up again, this time bolder, prouder. Guests cheered and returned to the dance floor, some wiping away tears, others hugging tightly. Elena leaned into Marcus, her voice trembling but full of pride. Elena. You turned an interruption into a statement, into history. Marcus, smiling. History was already being written tonight. I just made sure everyone heard it. The police cars lingered a moment longer before quietly pulling away, their lights dimming into the night. But the echoes of their arrival remained, captured on phones, destined to spread beyond Eastwood. The stage was set. This was no longer just a wedding. It was the beginning of a story the whole nation would soon hear. The band had started up again, though their notes carried a nervous edge, the saxophone a little too sharp, the drums slightly offbeat. Guests danced but glanced toward the street every few seconds, as though expecting the flashing lights to return. Marcus Green stood tall at the center of it all, his arm wrapped around Elena's waist, but his eyes kept flicking toward the shadows beyond the fence. He knew this wasn't over. Across the street, Evelyn Parker's living room felt like a furnace. She paced back and forth, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Every few minutes, she peeked through the blinds, watching as the party seemed to swell even louder than before. Her cheeks burned with humiliation. Evelyn, to herself. The mayor, of all people. How was I supposed to know? But still, he should have warned us, should have kept it quiet. This is a neighborhood, not a carnival. Her muttering grew harsher. The thought of the crowd cheering when Marcus revealed himself replayed in her head like an insult. She could almost hear their laughter directed at her. And that was something Evelyn Parker could not tolerate. She threw on a cardigan, her jaw set. If he thinks he can embarrass me, he's wrong. Dead wrong. Back at the wedding, the celebration stumbled back into rhythm. Guests clinked glasses, the bride and groom shared another kiss, and the children twirled on the dance floor. But beneath the glow of the fairy lights, unease simmered. A middle-aged man in a sharp grey suit leaned toward Marcus. Guest: "Mayor, with all respect, maybe we should move this indoors." "No telling if they'll come back." Marcus shook his head. "No, this is our night. Fear doesn't get a seat at this table." Elena whispered, "Marcus, maybe he's right. Just for the kids." Before she could finish, a new voice cut through the crowd. Evelyn. "This is outrageous!" Gasps rippled as heads turned. There she was, Evelyn Parker, storming across the street, her face flushed, her finger pointed like a weapon. She didn't hesitate at the edge of the lawn. She marched right onto the property, her voice dripping with disdain. "Evelyn, you think you can throw a circus in this neighborhood just because you're the mayor? You don't get special treatment." The guests recoiled, murmuring angrily. One woman muttered, "The nerve." Another pulled out her phone, already recording. Marcus stepped forward, shielding Elena with a protective arm. His voice was calm, but cold. "Marcus. Mrs. Parker, you're trespassing. This is private property." Evelyn scoffed. "Private? Ha ha, I live across the street. I've had to endure this racket all night. People coming and going, cars everywhere, loud music. You people don't know how to respect a neighborhood." The words, "you people," hung heavy in the air. The crowd stiffened. A young man in the back muttered, "Did she just—" Marcus's expression hardened. Elena's nails dug into his hand. "Marcus. This isn't about noise, is it?" Evelyn faltered, but only for a second. "Don't play the victim. I called the police because this is disorderly. And don't think you can wave your little title around to excuse it." At that moment, Sergeant O'Malley and Officer Daniels, who had lingered in their squad car down the block, hurried back toward the scene. The rising voices had drawn them like moths to flame. O'Malley. "Mrs. Parker, please step back. This isn't appropriate." But Evelyn wasn't finished. She spun on the officers, jabbing her finger. "Evelyn. No, you should be citing them, not protecting them. He's the mayor, for God's sake, not a king. Just because he's got power doesn't mean he can—" Marcus raised his voice just enough to slice through her tirade. "Marcus. Enough." The crowd went silent. He stepped closer, his tuxedo gleaming under the lights, his presence filling the space like a tidal wave. "Marcus. You called the police on a wedding where families gathered, where children played, where two people celebrated love. And when the truth came out, instead of apologizing, you doubled down with prejudice." Evelyn's mouth opened and closed. The crowd murmured angrily now, their patience thinning. A guest shouted from the back, "Say you're sorry." Another, "We deserve better neighbors than this." Phones rose higher, recording every second. Evelyn's face twisted with defiance, but sweat beaded on her forehead. "I don't have to apologize for wanting peace and quiet in my own neighborhood." Marcus tilted his head. Peace and quiet, or control? Because peace isn't broken by laughter and music, it's broken by hate. And tonight, hate came from across the street. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. O'Malley finally stepped forward, his voice firm. "O'Malley. Mrs. Parker, you're escalating the situation. You need to return to your property immediately." Evelyn turned, aghast. "You're taking his side? He's the one disturbing the peace." Daniels, hesitant. "Ma'am, it's his wedding. It's lawful. You need to leave." The crowd erupted in cheers. Evelyn's face went crimson. Evelyn. "You'll regret this," she hissed, glaring at Marcus. "Mayor or not, you can't hide behind your title forever." Marcus's reply was ice. "I don't hide behind my title. I live by it, and my duty is to protect this city from exactly this kind of division." The applause was deafening now. Evelyn backed away, retreating across the lawn, her face twisted in defeat as cameras followed her every step. Elena turned to Marcus, her eyes wide. "Elena, you didn't just defend us, you defended everyone who's ever been treated like this." Marcus kissed her hand softly. "This was supposed to be about us. But maybe tonight is bigger than us." The guests gathered closer, some chanting his name, others hugging each other tightly. The air was no longer filled with fear. It was filled with pride. But Marcus knew deep down, this was just the beginning. The confrontation had been captured on dozens of phones. By morning, the world would know what happened on Willow Lane. And Evelyn Parker's attempt to silence joy had only given it a louder voice. The air still vibrated with the aftershocks of Evelyn Parker's tirade. Guests clutched glasses they had forgotten to sip from, the band stood frozen with instruments in hand, and the officers shifted uneasily as though hoping the ground might swallow them whole. The tension was thick, like a storm cloud refusing to break. At the center of it all stood Marcus Green, the groom whose wedding had been turned into a spectacle. He could have retreated, could have chosen silence, but the look in his bride's eyes told him something undeniable. This moment demanded more. He stepped toward the microphone at the edge of the dance floor, tapping it gently until the crackle drew every eye to him. Elena gripped the train of her gown nervously, her heart pounding, but she nodded when Marcus glanced back. Marcus. Friends, family, officers, and neighbors. His eyes swept toward Evelyn, who lingered near the street, arms folded but face pale. Tonight was supposed to be about joy, about love. But sometimes life reminds us that joy cannot exist without struggle, and love cannot shine without being tested. A murmur rippled through the crowd, phones rising again to capture his every word. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket. The fairy lights caught on a small polished pin, engraved with the seal of the city. Slowly, deliberately, he fastened it to his lapel, the metallic gleam visible even from the back of the crowd. Marcus. For those of you who don't know me beyond tonight, my name is Marcus Green, and I have the honor of serving as the elected mayor of Eastwood. The announcement hit like a thunderclap. Gasps erupted. Some guests shouted in excitement. Others simply stood stunned, their phones trembling as they captured history in real time. The officers' jaws tightened. Officer Daniels shifted awkwardly, while Sergeant O'Malley simply lowered his gaze, as though realizing the depth of what had just unfolded. From across the street, Evelyn's face drained of color. Her grip on her cardigan tightened until her knuckles turned white. She whispered under her breath, almost pleading with herself. Evelyn, to herself. No, not here, not me. How could I have known? But even she knew the truth. It wasn't ignorance. It was assumption. And now the entire neighborhood was watching her. Assumptions crumble. Marcus raised a hand for quiet, and slowly the murmurs subsided. Marcus. I stand before you tonight not as a politician, not as a title, but as a man who dared to love and celebrate that love publicly. Yet, in the midst of laughter, dancing, and family, someone saw danger. Someone saw disorder. And why? Because of the color of the people celebrating here tonight. He paused, letting the words sink in. Guests nodded, some wiping tears from their eyes. Elena clutched his arm tighter, her own heart swelling with both fear and pride. Marcus. This isn't new. This isn't rare. Across this country, people of color gather for birthdays, for graduations, for weddings, and too often, their joy is mistaken for threat, their music mistaken for menace, their very existence mistaken for disturbance. The crowd broke into spontaneous applause, a roar of agreement. The officers glanced at each other nervously, caught in the middle of a tide much bigger than themselves. Marcus's voice grew steadier, deeper, as though years of bottled frustration had finally found its outlet. Marcus. But let me make one thing clear. Tonight is proof that we are no longer silent. We will celebrate without apology. We will live without fear. And we will not allow prejudice to dictate when and how we find happiness. He looked toward Evelyn, whose face twisted between anger and shame. Marcus. To my neighbor who called the police, you thought you were defending order. But what you defended was a lie. And tonight, the truth stood taller. Gasps and murmurs swept the lawn. Evelyn shrank back, her arms folding tighter as cameras zoomed in on her trembling face. Elena stepped forward then, her voice ringing clear beside her husband's. Elena. This day was about love. But love doesn't just belong to us. It belongs to this whole community. And we're not afraid to share it, even when someone tries to dim the light. So I say, let's shine brighter. Her words brought cheers, whistles and claps that shook the very air. Guests raised glasses, chanting Marcus's name, chanting, "Love wins! Love wins!" The officers, realizing the moment was spiraling far beyond their control, slowly retreated toward their cars. Sergeant O'Malley muttered to Daniels under his breath. O'Malley. This one's going viral. Daniels. It already is. Look at all the phones. Indeed, dozens of cameras captured the scene, live streams beaming the mayor's declaration out to the world before the night was even over. Twitter feeds lit up with hashtags. Mayor wedding. Love wins in Eastwood. Called on the mayor. Marcus raised his glass high, his voice booming now with a preacher's cadence. Marcus. So tonight, let us turn disruption into declaration. Let us turn fear into unity. And let us remember that this is not just a wedding. It is a statement. That joy is resistance. That love is stronger than hate. That unity is louder than division. The cheer that followed was deafening. Guests clinked glasses, the band struck up again, this time with a triumphant anthem, and the dance floor filled with renewed energy. Children laughed, elders swayed, and Elena kissed Marcus under the twinkling lights as the cameras flashed like stars. From her window, Evelyn watched it all unfold, her stomach twisted into knots. She had called for silence, and instead she had created a megaphone. Every word Marcus spoke was now etched into the city's memory, and her name would forever be tied to the moment she tried, and failed, to stifle it. Evelyn, whispering, "What have I done?" As the night wore on, reporters began arriving at the edge of Willow Lane, their vans lining the street. Microphones thrust forward, cameras zoomed in, questions flew through the humid night air. Reporter. Mayor Green, how do you respond to your neighbor's actions? Marcus, still holding Elena's hand, smiled faintly. Marcus. I respond the way I always will, with truth, with love, and with leadership. Tonight wasn't ruined. Tonight was redefined. And tomorrow, we'll talk about what this means for our city. The crowd erupted again, a living wall of cheers. And so, what began as a wedding on Willow Lane had become something far greater, a declaration that would ripple through Eastwood, through the state, and beyond. The lawn of Willow Lane had transformed into something far larger than a wedding. Where once there had been clinking glasses and soft jazz, now there was the roar of applause, the thunder of feet stomping in unison, and the electric hum of a crowd realizing they were part of something historic. Guests shouted Marcus's name. Others chanted, "Love wins! Love wins!" A cluster of young people near the dance floor live-streamed, their screens glowing as hundreds of hearts floated across comments scrolling in real time. Guest 1, to camera. They tried to shut us down. But look at this. This is unity. Guest 2. The mayor just told the whole world that love can't be silenced. This is history, y'all. Marcus Green stood at the center, Elena's hand in his chest rising and falling with controlled breath. He had delivered his declaration, but now he simply let the moment belong to the people. He watched his guests, his family, his city reclaim joy with a defiance that rang louder than any siren. Elena leaned close, whispering above the roar. Elena. Marcus. It feels like the whole world is watching. Marcus, smiling softly. Good. Let them. Across the street, Evelyn Parker had slumped into her porch chair, her eyes wide with disbelief. Every cheer from the wedding hit her like a slap. She could see the reporters now, cameras flashing, microphones bobbing as journalists jotted frantic notes. Her neighbor, her mayor, wasn't just salvaging his wedding. He was turning it into a movement. Evelyn, to herself. No. This isn't what I wanted. I just wanted peace and quiet. But even she knew the truth. Her peace had always been selective. Inside the wedding, the reaction grew more personal. A grandmother in a navy gown dabbed tears from her eyes. Grandmother. I never thought I'd live to see the day our joy couldn't be silenced. Lord, this is a blessing. A young man with dreadlocks raised his glass. Young man. To Marcus and Elena. To love and justice. The toast was echoed by dozens, champagne bubbling over rims as glasses clinked like bells of triumph. The reporters pressed closer, emboldened by the crowd. Reporter 1. Mayor Green, what message do you hope this sends to the city? Marcus turned, his voice calm, but resolute. Marcus. The message is simple. No community should fear celebrating life. Not because of race, not because of prejudice, not because someone sees difference as danger. Tonight, we showed that dignity cannot be called into question simply for existing. The cameras flashed, catching Elena's proud smile beside him. On social media, the reaction was instantaneous. Tweets spread with lightning speed. White neighbor calls cops on black wedding. Turns out Groom is the mayor. This is poetic justice. Eastwood just became the epicenter of the fight against casual racism. Number sign, love wins in Eastwood. Asterisk, 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 watching the live stream. Marcus Green is dropping truth at his own wedding. This man is unstoppable. Within an hour, national news networks began running the footage. Anchors spoke in hushed, excited tones about the mayor who turned his wedding into a rallying cry. Back at the venue, guests swarmed Marcus and Elena, hugging them, shaking their hands, thanking them. A teenage girl with tears streaking her cheeks approached shyly. Teen girl. Mayor Green. My dad was arrested last year for just being outside too late. They said he was loitering. He lost his job. Watching you tonight, it feels like someone finally sees us. Marcus crouched to her level, his voice tender. Marcus. I see you, and I promise you, this fight isn't just for me. It's for every family like yours. The girl burst into sobs, clinging to her mother as onlookers wiped their own eyes. Elena turned to Marcus, her own voice thick with emotion. Elena, you've always fought for them, but tonight they're fighting for you too. He squeezed her hand. Then maybe we finally have the strength to change things. Meanwhile, Evelyn couldn't escape the sound of chants echoing across the street. She shut her windows, but the noise pierced through. She turned on the television, only to find the same scene being broadcast live. She muted it, but the captions still scrolled. Mayor's wedding confrontation goes viral. She buried her face in her hands. Everyone will know. Everyone will blame me. For the first time in years, Evelyn Parker felt small. On the lawn, the celebration surged again. The band returned to their instruments, this time playing with fiery passion, the saxophone wailing like a victory cry. Guests danced not just for the couple, but for themselves, for their right to exist without suspicion. Marcus raised his voice one last time above the music. Marcus. Tonight, we rewrite the story of Willow Lane. No longer a place where prejudice tried to stop a wedding, but a place where love defeated hate. The crowd exploded with cheers. Some threw confetti left over from earlier in the evening, others linked arms and swayed in time with the music. And through it all, Marcus and Elena danced, their movements graceful, their faces radiant, the spotlight of justice and joy upon them. The confrontation had started as an interruption, but it ended as a declaration. Guests would remember it not as the night police arrived, but as the night a community discovered its voice. And Evelyn Parker, trapped in her house across the street, would remember it as the night she learned that silence could never again be mistaken for peace. The celebration pulsed with renewed energy. But beneath the joy, a current of something deeper ran through the crowd. People weren't just here for a wedding anymore. They were witnesses to a story that had already grown beyond Willow Lane. The murmurs of the guests, the flashes of cameras, and the endless glow of phone screens made it clear. Marcus Green had their attention, and perhaps the attention of the entire country. Marcus knew it too. He glanced at Elena, who stood beside him, her gown shimmering under the lights, her hand steady in his. She gave him the smallest nod, the kind that said, "I believe in you." He stepped back to the microphone. The music faded again. Conversations hushed. Even the children stopped their laughter as anticipation swept across the lawn. Marcus. Friends, family, neighbors, and those who are now listening beyond these walls. Tonight began as a wedding, a moment of love, a celebration of unity. But when the police lights arrived, when suspicion entered our joy, something changed. Tonight became a reminder of a truth we live with every day. The crowd leaned in, silence heavy, but respectful. Marcus. The truth is this. In too many neighborhoods, in too many hearts, joy has a color, safety has a color, belonging has a color. And if you don't fit the picture, your laughter becomes noise. Your celebration becomes a disturbance. Your very existence becomes a threat. A murmur of agreement rose from the guests. Some clapped softly, others wiped their eyes. Marcus's voice grew stronger, carried by conviction. Marcus. But I refuse to let our children inherit that world without a fight. I refuse to let them believe that love should ever be questioned, that joy should ever be policed, that dignity should ever depend on who's holding the phone across the street. He turned, his gaze sweeping across the crowd until it landed on Evelyn Parker's house. The blinds twitched. He didn't call her name, but everyone knew where his words landed. Marcus. Some will say this was just a mistake, a misunderstanding, but we know better. We know that behind every call like this lies a judgment, and behind every judgment lies a choice. Tonight, someone chose to see danger instead of happiness, fear instead of love, division instead of community. Gasps rippled. A woman near the front whispered, "He's saying what we've all wanted to say." Elena stepped closer, her voice trembling but clear. Elena. And yet look at us. We are still here. We are still celebrating. We are still dancing. Love is louder than fear. Cheers erupted, loud and long. Marcus waited, his expression softening as he took her hand again. Marcus. She's right. Love is louder. And tonight, this neighborhood, this city, has a choice. Will we let fear write our stories, or will we write them ourselves, with joy, with unity, with courage? A reporter at the back shouted a question. Reporter. Mayor Green, are you saying this moment will lead to action beyond tonight? Marcus turned toward him, his eyes steady. Marcus. Yes, because leadership isn't about speeches in City Hall. It's about standing here, on the grass, where your own dignity was challenged and saying, no more. It's about turning pain into policy, moments into movements, and tonight, I promise you this. The fight for equality in Eastwood does not pause at my wedding. It begins here. The crowd erupted. The cheer was so powerful, it rattled the string lights above them. Among the crowd, a young mother lifted her son onto her shoulders. Mother to her boy. Look, that's your mayor. That's how you stand tall. The boy's eyes sparkled as he waved a tiny hand in the air, copying Marcus's raised fist. Across the street, Evelyn Parker sat frozen in her chair. Every word echoed like judgment. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, to claim she hadn't meant harm. But she knew none of it would matter. The cameras had already written her into the story as the face of fear. Evelyn to herself. I'll never live this down. Back at the mic, Marcus raised his glass. Marcus. To love that conquers prejudice, to joy that cannot be silenced, to unity that begins here, tonight, and spreads until no neighbor, no child, no family has to wonder if their happiness is a crime. To Eastwood, let us be better than we were yesterday. Every guest raised their glass. The clinking was like a chorus, a sound of defiance and hope colliding in the same breath. The band struck up again, this time with a triumphant tune. People danced, laughed, and embraced one another with tears in their eyes. But above it all lingered Marcus's words, seared into memory and recorded on countless devices. Elena leaned against him, her smile tender. Elena. You turned our wedding into history. Marcus. No, love, we all did, together. That night, as the celebration carried on, the first news alerts appeared on phones across the city. Breaking news. Mayor defends. Wedding against racist complaint. Speech goes viral. And so, what began as a neighbor's call to silence joy had become the birth of a movement, led not just by a mayor, but by a groom who refused to let love bow to fear. By morning, Eastwood was no longer just a quiet suburban town, it was the epicenter of a storm that stretched across the nation. The video clips spread faster than wildfire. On Twitter, hashtags like #MayorWedding, #LoveWinsInEastwood, and #SheCalledOnTheMayor trended worldwide. Facebook feeds overflowed with reposts of Marcus's speech, the crowd's cheers, and the trembling face of Evelyn Parker caught in the glow of smartphone cameras. TikTok users added music overlays to the moment Marcus pinned the mayoral badge on his tuxedo, turning it into a viral symbol of defiance. Morning news anchors spoke with a mix of awe and urgency. Anchor 1. This was supposed to be a wedding, but it turned into something much larger, a statement about race, dignity, and leadership. Anchor 2. That's right, Sandra. Overnight, Mayor Marcus Green's speech from his wedding reception went viral, with millions praising his poise in the face of blatant prejudice. Clips rolled across the screen, Marcus raising his glass, Elena declaring, "Love is louder than fear," and the crowd chanting, "Love wins," beneath twinkling lights. In New York, morning commuters watched the footage on the giant screens in Times Square. In Los Angeles, late-night hosts replayed the clip with biting commentary about racism in the suburbs. Even international outlets covered the story, framing it as an American parable of love colliding with systemic bias. But not all voices were celebratory. Conservative pundits on talk radio criticized Marcus. Pundit 1. This is political theater. He exploited his own wedding for a campaign speech. Pundit 2. Or maybe he staged the entire thing to boost his image. You don't get that many cameras in a backyard without planning it. The counter-narratives spread, but they were drowned out by the tidal wave of support. Polls released that afternoon showed Marcus's approval rating soaring by 20 points. Meanwhile, Evelyn Parker's name began trending online. Her neighbors recognized her house from the videos. Within hours, her phone rang relentlessly. Reporters, strangers, even distant relatives demanding answers. She refused every call. Curtains drawn, television muted, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, staring at the headlines splashed across her laptop. Eastwood neighbor who called. Police identified. Faces backlash. Her hands shook. She whispered to herself, "They're making me the villain. I just wanted peace and quiet." But deep down, she knew it wasn't about noise. It was about her assumptions. Assumptions the whole world was now dissecting. Back at City Hall, Marcus convened with his closest aides. Maya Delgado, his communications director, slapped down a stack of newspapers. Maya, Marcus, you've gone global. We need to craft a statement before this gets out of control. Marcus leaned back, exhaustion in his eyes. Marcus, I already made my statement, Maya. The truth doesn't change because cameras showed up. Maya, yes, but the media machine doesn't stop. You're not just a mayor anymore. You're a symbol. And symbols need strategy. Tom Reeves, his old campaign manager, chimed in. Tom, she's right. If you don't seize this moment, others will. They'll twist it, weaponize it. You have to lead, Marcus. Not just Eastwood, but everyone watching. Marcus sighed, glancing at a photo of him and Elena taped to his office wall. I wanted our wedding to be about love. Instead, it's about hate, or at least about fighting it. Maya. No, it's still about love. But now love has a megaphone. Elena, meanwhile, found herself bombarded outside the grocery store, strangers stopping her in the aisles. Stranger one. You were so brave standing beside him. God bless you both. Stranger two. My daughter watched your speech 5 times. She says she wants a marriage like yours one day. Elena smiled politely, but inside she carried the heavy truth. Their private vows had become public property. Their marriage was no longer just theirs. In Washington, D.C., the ripple effects reached the highest offices. Senators debated on the floor, using Marcus's speech as ammunition for national policing reform. Civil rights leaders praised him in interviews. Activists reached out, asking him to headline rallies across the country. A CNN chyron read, Mayor Green, wedding speech or civil rights turning point. But the storm also brought threats. Marcus's staff intercepted emails laced with slurs, phone calls warning him to watch his back. Security around his home doubled overnight. Elena confessed to him one evening, her voice trembling. Elena, I knew marrying you meant living in the spotlight. I just didn't think the spotlight would burn this hot. Marcus wrapped his arms around her. We'll get through it, together. Meanwhile, the people of Eastwood divided sharply. Some organized rallies in support of the mayor, carrying signs reading, Love lives here, and We stand with Marcus. Others grumbled on neighborhood forums, defending Evelyn Parker, claiming she was misunderstood or just following the rules. The divide grew so tense that the city council announced a public hearing to address the incident. Evelyn would be called to testify. Reporters swarmed outside City Hall. Reporter. Mayor Green, what do you expect from the council hearing? Marcus answered calmly, though his jaw was tight. Marcus. I expect honesty. I expect accountability. And I expect this city to prove it's better than what we saw on Willow Lane. Evelyn, hearing the announcement on her TV, dropped her teacup, porcelain shattering across the floor. Evelyn, to herself. A hearing? They'll drag my name through the mud. I'll be ruined. Her reflection in the darkened TV screen stared back at her, aged and trembling. For the first time, Evelyn Parker wasn't sure if she was the victim or the villain in her own story. That evening, Marcus and Elena walked together through the quiet halls of City Hall. He stopped by a window overlooking the plaza, where supporters were lighting candles in a vigil. Elena. They believe in you. Marcus. They don't just believe in me. They believe in what we stood for that night. That love can be louder. That hate can be unmasked. that even in the face of prejudice, Joy refuses to bow. He placed his hand against the glass, watching the flames flicker below. But now it's bigger than us. And tomorrow we face the storm head-on. The council chamber was packed beyond capacity. Rows of wooden benches strained under the weight of residents, journalists, activists, and curious onlookers. Television cameras perched on tripods like metal vultures, red lights blinking as they broadcast the proceedings live. The marble pillars and ornate chandeliers that once gave the room an air of quiet authority now seemed to pulse with tension. At the front sat the 7 members of Eastwood's City Council, their expressions grave. The chairwoman, Councillor Denise Alvarez, rapped her gavel sharply. Councillor Alvarez. This hearing will come to order. Tonight we will address the events of June 14th on Willow Lane. We will hear testimony from Mayor Marcus Green, Mrs. Evelyn Parker, and members of the community. Let the record show that this hearing is open to the public and recorded for official review. The murmur of the crowd quieted, though the air buzzed with expectation. Evelyn Parker sat at a small table to the left. Her once carefully coiffed curls were limp, her cardigan buttoned tight despite the summer heat. Her eyes darted nervously from the cameras to the crowd. Every time someone whispered, she flinched, as though the words were arrows meant for her alone. Across from her sat Marcus Green. Unlike Evelyn, he appeared calm, poised in his dark suit, his mayoral pin gleaming under the chamber lights. Elena sat directly behind him, her presence a quiet pillar of support. Councillor Alvarez. Mrs. Parker, you may begin. Evelyn rose, clutching a crumpled sheet of paper. Her hands shook as she spoke. Evelyn. Councillors, neighbours, I only did what any responsible citizen would do. I heard loud music, saw a large gathering, and feared for the peace of our neighbourhood. I didn't know it was the mayor's wedding. I didn't know... Her voice cracked. Murmurs spread through the chamber. A man in the back shouted, "You knew exactly what you were doing," before being silenced by the gavel. Evelyn, voice rising. "I'm not a racist. I was only thinking of safety, that's all. I never meant for it to turn into this circus." Her words hung awkwardly in the air, the paper trembling in her hands. Councillor Alvarez turned. Councillor Alvarez. Mayor Green, your response. Marcus stood, adjusting his tie. His voice was measured, but carried the weight of every eye in the room. Marcus. Councillors, fellow citizens, Mrs. Parker claims she acted out of concern for peace, but let us examine what she saw. A wedding, a celebration, families gathered, children playing, elders laughing, and yet she described it to the police as dangerous, as disorderly. Why? He paused, scanning the chamber. Marcus. Would she have made that call if the crowd had looked different, if the skin color of the guests had matched hers? We know the answer, even if we're afraid to speak it. A ripple of applause broke out before being silenced by the gavel. Evelyn shrank in her seat. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his voice sharpening. Marcus. I am not here tonight to shame Mrs. Parker. I am here because this is bigger than her. This is about the countless families in Eastwood who wonder whether their laughter will be mistaken for menace, who wonder whether their children will be seen as threats instead of blessings. This isn't about one phone call. It's about a system of assumptions that suffocates joy before it can breathe. The crowd erupted in applause again, louder this time. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras zooming in on Marcus's resolute face. Councillor James Whitfield, the most conservative voice on the council, leaned forward. Councillor Whitfield. Mayor Green, with respect, are you saying Mrs. Parker should be punished for making a noise complaint? Citizens have a right to call the police. Marcus turned, his reply calm but devastating. Marcus. Yes, Councillor, citizens do have that right, but rights come with responsibility. And when those calls are rooted in bias, When they weaponize law enforcement against innocent people, they cease to be about safety and become about control. That is not a right. That is an abuse. The chamber erupted once more, chants of, "That's right," and "Say it," filling the air. Evelyn could take no more. She shot to her feet, tears streaking her face. "Evelyn, you're making me out to be a monster. I didn't mean harm. I just wanted quiet." Marcus met her gaze steadily. Marcus. "Mrs. Parker, I believe you wanted quiet, but not the kind you claim. You wanted quiet from voices that made you uncomfortable, from joy you couldn't accept, from neighbors you didn't see as equals. That's the quiet you tried to enforce, and it's the kind this city can no longer afford." Gasps filled the room. Evelyn collapsed back into her chair, sobbing quietly. Councillor Alvarez rapped the gavel again, her voice firm. Councillor Alvarez. "Order. We will now hear testimony from community members one by one." Residents took the stand. A young black mother spoke first. "Every time we have a cookout, I feel eyes on us, like someone's waiting for us to step out of line. Mrs. Parker's call was not an exception. It was a reflection of what we live with every day." An elderly white neighbor followed, surprising many. "I've lived next to Marcus for 10 years. He's a good man. That wedding was beautiful. Evelyn, you didn't call because of noise. You called because you didn't want them there. That's the truth." The chamber buzzed with electricity. When the testimonies concluded, Councillor Alvarez leaned forward, her tone decisive. Councillor Alvarez. "We have heard enough. The evidence is clear. This was not a matter of noise, but of bias. Mrs. Parker, while you will not face legal charges, the Council formally censures your actions as discriminatory and harmful to the fabric of our community." Evelyn buried her face in her hands. The cameras zoomed in mercilessly. Councillor Alvarez. "Mayor Green, we commend your conduct. You turned an attempt to shame you into a call for unity. This council pledges to work with you on policies to prevent incidents like this in the future." The gavel struck. The chamber erupted into cheers so loud they echoed off the marble walls. Elena wrapped her arms around Marcus as he returned to his seat. "Elena, you did it. You turned her attack into accountability." Marcus nodded, though his face was solemn. Marcus. "It's a start, but we're not done. Tonight was about one neighbor. Tomorrow will be about a system." Outside, the plaza overflowed with supporters holding candles and signs. "We stand with Marcus. Love lives here. Bias has no home in Eastwood." The chants rolled like thunder through the night, a chorus of unity echoing far beyond the city's borders. And Evelyn Parker, slipping out the back of City Hall under the glare of cameras, realized the full weight of her mistake. She had tried to silence joy, and instead she had amplified justice. The following morning, the city of Eastwood woke to a new reality. Headlines dominated every local and national outlet. Council condemns neighbor's call as racially biased. Mayor Green turns wedding into Tessa. Movement. Bias has no home in Eastwood. Clips from the council hearing played on repeat. Evelyn Parker's tearful denials, Marcus Green's unflinching rebuttal, the crowd's thunderous applause when the council declared her actions discriminatory. In Marcus's office, stacks of newspapers covered the desk. Elena leaned against the window, scrolling through her phone. Elena. "It's everywhere. CNN, BBC, even Al Jazeera. They're calling you the wedding mayor." Marcus chuckled softly, though his eyes carried fatigue. Marcus. "I wanted to be remembered for policy, not nicknames. But if this moment can spark change, I'll take it." Elena. "It already has. The council's censure is just the beginning." Across town, Evelyn Parker faced the opposite storm. Reporters camped outside her house, microphones thrust toward her whenever she stepped onto her porch. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Anonymous flyers had been left on her lawn overnight, reading, "Bias lives here." Inside, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, staring at an untouched cup of tea. Her sister's voice echoed through the phone speaker. "Sister, Evie, you need to apologize publicly. A real apology, not excuses." Evelyn, whispering, "But if I admit it, then everyone will know I was wrong." "Sister, they already know." Evelyn hung up, burying her face in her hands. Meanwhile, at City Hall, a special session was convened. The chamber was again packed, anticipation high. Councillor Denise Alvarez stood at the dais, flanked by the other members. Cameras rolled. Councillor Alvarez. After reviewing testimony and evidence, the council issues the following verdict. The call made by Mrs. Evelyn Parker to law enforcement on June 14th was not a legitimate public safety concern, but an act rooted in racial bias. While no criminal charges are filed, the council formally condemns her actions and mandates community accountability measures, including public apology and participation in diversity education programs. The chamber buzzed. Some gasped at the leniency. Others nodded, satisfied that the verdict set a precedent. Councillor Alvarez continued. Councillor Alvarez. Furthermore, the council commends Mayor Marcus Green for his conduct. In the face of discrimination, he displayed dignity, leadership, and a commitment to unity. His actions transformed a moment of prejudice into an opportunity for growth. As such, the council unanimously issues a commendation recognizing Mayor Green's extraordinary service to the community. Applause thundered through the chamber. Elena's eyes welled with tears as she squeezed Marcus's hand. A reporter shouted above the noise. Reporter. "Mayor Green, do you accept this commendation?" Marcus stood, his voice steady. Marcus. "I accept not for myself, but for everyone who has ever been silenced, doubted, or diminished because of who they are. This commendation belongs to them, and it comes with a responsibility to make sure what happened on Willow Lane never happens again." The crowd roared its approval. Outside City Hall, supporters filled the plaza. Handmade signs read, "We stand with Marcus. Love is louder." And "Justice lives here." The atmosphere was electric, like a festival born from resilience. In the center, a young boy climbed onto his father's shoulders, waving a small sign that read, "Future Mayor." Boy, shouting, "Marcus Green, Marcus Green." The chant caught like wildfire until the entire plaza echoed his name. But while Marcus was celebrated, Evelyn Parker became infamous. Clips of her outburst, "I'm not a racist, I just wanted quiet," were replayed endlessly, dissected on talk shows, mocked in memes. Editorial cartoons depicted her with binoculars and a phone, peering suspiciously at joyful black families. At the grocery store, cashiers avoided small talk. Parents pulled their children closer when she walked by. Even church pews that once welcomed her now felt colder. Evelyn, to herself, in the mirror. One call ruined everything. But deep down, she knew it wasn't just one call. It was years of silent judgments, unspoken assumptions, and unchecked biases that had finally been dragged into the light. That evening, Marcus and Elena stood on the balcony of their home, looking out at the flickering lights of the city. Elena, do you realize what's happened? In just days, you've become more than a mayor. You've become a symbol. Marcus shook his head. Marcus, symbols can fade. Policies last. Tomorrow, I'll start drafting legislation to prevent weaponized 911 calls. People need to know there are consequences for using fear as a weapon. Eleanor smiled, slipping her arm through his. Elena. And tonight? Marcus exhaled, his shoulders easing for the first time in days. Marcus. Tonight, I'm just a husband, with the woman I love. That's the victory that matters most. They kissed, the city below cheering their names. Far away, Evelyn sat in darkness. Her television played yet another panel discussion about her actions, experts analyzing every word. She muted the sound, but the caption still screamed across the screen. Neighbours' bias condemned by council. Tears streaked her face as she whispered into the silence. Evelyn, I never thought I'd be the lesson everyone learns from. And in that moment, she realized the verdict wasn't just about Marcus's vindication. It was about her own reckoning, a reckoning she could no longer escape. 6 months had passed since the night of the wedding. Eastwood was no longer the same city, and neither were the people who lived in it. A new law. The first change came in the form of legislation. Standing in the rotunda of the state capitol, Marcus Green signed into law the Community Accountability Act, a bill prohibiting racially biased emergency calls and establishing penalties for those who weaponized the police against innocent citizens. Reporters packed the chamber as Marcus raised his pen. Elena stood beside him, radiant as ever. Marcus, to the crowd. This law ensures that no neighbour will again fear their joy being criminalised. Safety is not silence. Justice is not selective. Tonight, Eastwood leads by example. The room erupted in applause. Civil rights activists praised it as a model for other cities. Law journals began calling it the Green Doctrine. Folktas, community transformation. But the changes went beyond legislation. Block parties blossomed across Eastwood. Diverse, vibrant gatherings where music filled the air and laughter no longer felt like a crime. Churches collaborated on multicultural events. Schools introduced new programs teaching students about bias, empathy, and civic responsibility. At one such event, a teacher watched her students role play, calling the police responsibly. A little girl raised her hand. Student. So, if someone is just dancing or having fun, that's not danger, right? Teacher, smiling. That's right. Fun is not a crime. The class erupted in giggles, their innocence a reflection of the city's healing. Evelyn's fate. Evelyn Parker lived quietly now. She had delivered a public apology, her voice trembling before television cameras. Evelyn, I was wrong. My fear blinded me. I cannot undo the harm I caused, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to do better. Some accepted her words, others did not. She lost her spot on the Neighbourhood Association board, withdrew from her church committee, and rarely left her house except for required diversity training sessions mandated by the council. At one session, she sat across from a young black mother who had spoken against her at the hearing. The woman's eyes were sharp, but not cruel. Mother, you can't erase what you did, but maybe you can learn from it. Maybe you can teach others not to make the same mistake. Evelyn nodded, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Her life was smaller now, but for the first time, it was honest. Sat. Marcus's rise. Marcus's reputation soared. His approval ratings remained the highest in the city's history. National networks invited him to speak on panels about racial justice and community healing. Universities requested lectures. Grassroots groups began urging him to run for governor. Late one night, Marcus sat in his office, reviewing a stack of invitations. Elena entered, carrying 2 mugs of tea. Elena. They want you everywhere. Washington, New York, Los Angeles. You've become a symbol. Marcus sighed, taking a mug. Marcus. Symbols are powerful, but symbols can burn out. I want to be more than a headline. Elena, smiling. Then keep doing what you've always done. Lead with truth. The rest will follow. Tsaka. Personal triumphs. Amid the chaos, Marcus and Elena's marriage deepened. Their love, forged in the fire of public scrutiny, became unshakable. They often laughed at the irony, how their wedding, once threatened, had become the spark for a movement. At their 6-month anniversary, Elena teased him. Elena. Most people get flowers. I got legislation. Marcus, grinning. What can I say? I set the bar high. They toasted to resilience, to love, to a future they knew would hold more battles, but also more victories. Dashasil's national impact. The ripple effects reached far beyond Eastwood. Cities across the country began adopting versions of the Community Accountability Act. Law schools added case studies titled The Wedding That Changed Policy. On television, activists spoke Marcus's name alongside historic figures. A CNN anchor summarized it best. Anchor. In a time when division threatened to define us, one mayor reminded us that love, when defended with courage, can reshape law itself. Dafurze, Evelyn's redemption attempt. One evening, Evelyn attended a town hall where Marcus was speaking. She sat quietly in the back, her presence drawing murmurs. After Marcus finished, she stood hesitantly. Evelyn. Mayor Green, I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to thank you. Because of what happened, I was forced to see myself, to see how my fear hurt people. I will carry that shame, but I will also carry the lesson. I hope others can learn from me too. The room was silent. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Marcus. Growth begins with acknowledgement, Mrs. Parker. Let your lesson be a warning, but also a guide. Eastwood will not erase your mistake, but it can watch your effort to change. It wasn't absolution, but it was a beginning. Satis, Legacy of Willow Lane. Months later, the street where it all began was no longer remembered for a call to the police. Willow Lane became symbolic. The city erected a small plaque near the Green residence. On this site, love overcame fear. June 14th, the day unity spoke louder than prejudice. Couples visited it as though it were a landmark. Students snapped photos during school trips. And every time Marcus and Elena walked past it, they smiled quietly, reminded of how their love story had reshaped an entire city. Closing reflection. One night, standing before a national audience during a televised speech, Marcus reflected on the journey. Marcus. 6 months ago, my wedding was interrupted by fear disguised as caution. But fear did not win. Love did. And because of that, laws changed, hearts changed, a city changed. This is the legacy we leave when we refuse to bow to prejudice. Love is not just a feeling, it is a revolution. The crowd rose to its feet, applause thundering, Elena smiling proudly in the front row. And as the cameras panned across the stage, Marcus Green, the mayor, the husband, the symbol, stood tall, a living reminder that sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin not in parliaments or battlefields, but on the lawns of ordinary homes where love dares to be louder than hate.